In a long life, you discover who is really there. Not through declarations, not through the expressions of warmth that come easily when everything is going well, but through the harder moments, the ones that ask something of the people around you, the ones that reveal what the friendship is actually made of. And what you learn in those moments changes how you understand everything that came before. Sammy Davis Jr. walked one of the most complicated roads in American entertainment. He was, by any measure of talent, extraordinary. A singer, a dancer, a comedian, an actor, a musician who played multiple instruments, a performer whose range of ability was almost without precedent. And he was, from very early in his career, deeply loved by audiences who recognized in him something genuinely special. The standing ovations were real. The affection was real. And, alongside all of it, running parallel to the adoration throughout his entire career, was the humiliation. The hotels that wouldn't give him a room in the same building where he was performing. The casinos where he entertained thousands and then was expected to enter and leave through the service entrance. The industry that celebrated him on stage and treated him, off it, as someone who did not quite belong. He navigated this with a particular combination of grace and wit and genuine resilience that became one of the things people admired most about him. He didn't hide the reality of what he faced. He talked about it in interviews across his career with a directness and a humor that was both genuine and clearly costly. The humor was real, but it was also a form of armor. And underneath the armor was a man who needed what all people need, someone who was simply on his side. Not because of what he could do. Not when it was easy or convenient or professionally advantageous. Just on his side. Through everything. The friendship that became that for him, the one he pointed to across many years of conversation as the friendship that had mattered most, was with Frank Sinatra. It was, like all real friendships, complicated in its own ways. But its defining quality, the thing that made it the friendship Sammy Davis Jr. talked about with the most unguarded warmth, was consistency. Sinatra had been present in the moments that mattered. He had used whatever weight he carried in the industry, and by the 1950s it was considerable, to push against the discriminatory treatment that Davis faced. He had refused, at various points, to perform in venues that would not treat Davis with equal dignity. He had made it clear, not once but repeatedly, that his friendship with Davis was not conditional on the comfort of the people around them. That he was on his side, fully, not just when it was easy. Davis talked about this in a way that was never quite performative, never the formal acknowledgement of a debt. It was something more personal than that. The warmth in how he spoke about Sinatra was specific. Not the warmth of professional admiration, though that was real too. The warmth of someone who had been seen, who had been stood beside in moments when being stood beside required something. Who had known what it felt like to have someone say, with their presence and their choices, "I'm here, whatever the cost. I'm here." That is what he most valued. Not the performances they shared, not the professional association, though it had produced remarkable work. The being on his side. The reliability of it. The knowledge that when things were hard, the friendship would not flinch. Maybe you've known something like that. Maybe there is someone in your own life or in your own history who was there in the moments that required something, who didn't step back when things got difficult, who held the friendship in exactly the same way when it was costing them something as they did when it was easy. That kind of person is rare, and the friendship they offer, consistent, genuine, willing to pay the price, is one of the most valuable things a life can contain. Most friendships exist in the easy parts of a life, in the social occasions, the shared pleasures, the mild difficulties that everyone can navigate without too much cost. And those friendships have real value. They are part of what makes ordinary life livable and warm. But they are different from the friendship that has been tested, that has had to show what it's made of in a moment when showing required something. And the difference between the two kinds is not always visible until the test arrives. Sammy Davis Jr. spent decades in an industry where the easy parts and the difficult parts were always present simultaneously. The adoration of the crowd was real, and the humiliation in the parking lot was real. And he needed friends who could hold both, who could be present for the full reality of what his life was, not just the glamorous version. Frank Sinatra, at his best, was that. He knew what Davis was navigating. He didn't pretend it away. He stood beside it. And that standing beside, that willingness to be present for the difficult reality and not just the easy one, was the whole of what made the friendship matter. In his later years, Sammy Davis Jr. said something about friendship that people who heard it remembered. He said that one friend who was really there, who showed up not just in the good moments, but in the hard ones, was worth more than 1,000 who were there only when it cost them nothing. Not because the other friendships weren't real, but because the tested friendship was a different category of thing. It had been proved. It had shown its actual composition, and you could lean on it in the knowledge of what it was made of in a way you couldn't lean on the untested kind. Who has shown up for you in that way? Who has been present in the moments that cost them something? Who has stood beside the difficult reality of your life, the full version, not just the easy parts, and remained there? That person deserves more of your explicit gratitude than they have probably received. Because we tend to acknowledge the dramatic gestures of friendship and under-acknowledge the quiet, steady, year after year showing up, that is, in the end, the more meaningful thing. And the other direction of the question, are you that for anyone? Is there someone in your life, not necessarily in a dramatic situation, but in the ongoing texture of a life that has its difficult places, for whom you are the one who shows up, whose reality you know fully, including the parts that are hard, and whom you stand beside, not because it is easy, but because that is what the friendship means. That kind of friendship is worth choosing, actively and deliberately. It is worth being. So take a slow breath and think of the person who has been there for you through the difficult. And maybe, this week, tell them. Not in a grand declaration, just honestly. Just, I know what it cost you sometimes to be there. And I know I didn't always say this, But you being there, that has mattered more than anything else. That is what Sammy Davis Jr. eventually said to Frank Sinatra, in his own way. And what Sinatra said back made it clear he already knew. But it was still worth saying. It is always worth saying. There is one more dimension of Sammy Davis Jr. Friendship with those closest to him that is worth naming. Something about what the friendship did for him internally, beyond the external support. Because there is a particular freedom that comes from being known by someone who is genuinely on your side. A freedom from the constant low-level vigilance that life requires when you are not sure, in any given room, how you will be received. Sammy Davis Jr. spent much of his professional life navigating precisely that uncertainty. The never quite knowing which version of treatment was waiting, the celebrated performer or the excluded outsider. That vigilance has a cost. It is exhausting in a way that is hard to quantify, but deeply real. And in the company of the friend who was genuinely on his side, who made it clear, repeatedly and at cost, that his presence and his value were not in question, that vigilance could rest, even briefly, even just in the hours of that particular company. The room felt different. The energy that had been going into staying alert could be freed for something else. For being fully present. For the laughter that came more freely when you were not managing your reception. For the version of yourself that only shows up when you know you are genuinely safe. That safety, the particular safety of being with someone who is wholly on your side, is one of the greatest gifts one person can give another. It doesn't require drama or heroics. It requires consistency, the willingness to show up the same way every time, not only in the moments that are easy, but in all of them. To be the person in whose company the other person can finally put down the vigilance. To be genuinely safe. That is what Sammy Davis Jr. found in the friendship that carried him. And it is what the best friendships offer. Not excitement or adventure or professional advantage, but the particular peace of being completely safe. Completely yourself. Completely free from the need to manage how you are received. Just there. And known. And that is everything.